what will be the expectations for Pat Kelsey in year one with Louisville in order to please and try to, get the fan base to buy in on him?
I think look, people are going to be clamoring even more so now for the tournament. Look, the guys won 4 out of 5 conference tournaments.
Yeah.
So that's going to be flirting around there. Especially, I go back to this treasure chest of name, image, and likeness that I've been told by everybody that they apparently have. Now I'm curious to see what that's like after this, and if that goes up or down, or if the 502 circle is working harder. But all I've been told from all these people that apparently are in the know is that there is a treasure chest of NIL. And if that's where we are in this day and age, and this guy's a ball of energy, I think you're going to see this guy. And this is one of the reasons why Josh Hurd probably went this route. I don't want to say it's like somebody that you can manage a little bit better and say, like, you're going to bring back the Cardinal Caravan. You're going to have open practices. You're going to meet with donors. You're going to do X, Y, and Z. And
you're going to go to the Jeff Brom fish fries.
Exactly. Things like that, and be out and about in the community and hopefully win people over. I think that people will buy in. I think you just need to be flirting with one of those first 4 team out of the tournament with a schedule that, look, the ACC, I know now, is taking a victory lap, and you'll sit here and say it's like, oh, it's the conference hasn't been good. But with what it's been in the last few years, I think people will be you got to be flirting with the tournament. You got to be receiving votes in the top 25, depending on what they do with the roster. Because take it a step further, I'm getting texts. It's like, oh, is there anybody on this roster? And I'm kind of like, guys, like, no disrespect to them, but like, they're coming off a 4-win team and an 8-win team.
Yeah.
If Pat Kelsey comes in and thinks like, I don't want that losing mentality or those energy vampires, which I know is my bingo card word from the first, then so be it. Bring in his own guys and start over, So that's something that, and it's no disparagement of them. By all accounts, it seems like they're good kids. They just weren't coached well and were confused on a lot of things. I think if he wants to bring in his guys, flirting with the top 25 and maybe being one of those first 4 or next 4 outs would get people there. With year number 2 saying like, no, with this treasure chest money, you need to be in the tournament. It's with the resources here, you got to be one of the 68 teams in the tournament.
I'll say this. First of all, like, as far as the portal stuff goes, I said this with Greer last week, but I think it's worth repeating. There were 2 thoughts I had on the Louisville players in the portal. There's 7 of them now, I believe. Number 1 was the thought you just had, was you went 12-52 with these guys the last 2 years. Is it really the edge of the world? But my number 2 thought is, look, and I'm going to compare it to Mike Woodson in Indiana again. When he took the job, there were 6 Indiana players in the portal, and Trace Jackson Davis had declared for the NBA draft. And everyone had the same big picture questions of everything's falling apart. What the heck is the roster going to look like? Woodson got Jackson Davis to come back from the draft for not 1, but for 2 years, and all 6 of those guys in the portal came back. Not saying that Pat Kelsey's going to do exactly that, because again, you got to figure out which players he wants, who he doesn't want, all that stuff. But just because they're in the portal doesn't mean they can't come back still. That there's still that possibility open. We'll see what ends up happening there. Number 2, you're going to have to be able to use the portal either to replace those guys, to supplement those guys, whatever, because they were 8-24 last year. The roster is going to have to get better. There were some pieces there that you liked, but the roster is going to have to get better. And as far as the expectations go, it's a little unfair to say that before we know what the roster is going to look like, but damn it, that's how this works with podcasting and radio. But I think here's the spot he's getting into. Even though he's in year 1, it's new for him. Louisville fans are going, I've been saying this for months, but it becomes even more of a case of how much of a mess it's been. Louisville fans are not going to be patient, nor should they be patient, because they've sat through a pile of shit the last decade on various levels.
I feel like I'm on a Twitter space with Diener. Yeah. How about that? I like it.
Yeah, I try to keep it PG most of the time, but I mean, that's the best way to describe it, right? What Louisville basketball was off the court with all the scandals, and now on the court the past 2-3 years. That's what it's been. And Louisville fans want to win. They want to win now. Now, I've heard people say, they better be in the second weekend or stuff like that, do the Jerome Tang thing. I'm like, that would obviously be spectacular. We'll see what type of roster he puts together, but I don't know if that should be your baseline expectation for year 1.
Right.
But I think the absolute goal should be make the tournament. You haven't been in the field since 2019. Be one of those 68 teams that's called. But if you have a year where you're a couple games over 500, you're in the NIT, I think it's not where Louisville wants to be as a program by any means, but at least at some point, again, flirting with the bubble in some way, shape, or form. And even if it's, being 19 and 15 and in the NIT, I think that's a year where people can say, okay, it's not where we want to be long term, but you're laying a foundation. You're putting yourself in a much better spot to be where yes, you can vault yourself up. I think that's the bare minimum of what they would have to do. Obviously,
Well,
though, I think the clear goal is going to be NCAA tournament or
Well,
bust.
and it's funny, as you were going on the goals and everything, I got something in the inbox from good old Zach Greenwald, the Louisville SID, saying media advisory president Kim Shansel. Is that her last name? That's good that we don't know the president's name. I know everyone's
we
freaking out,
shouldn't.
tagging her on Twitter. And the athletic director Josh Hurd scheduled to meet with the media on Thursday, March 28th at 3 p.m. at the practice facility for a change, switching up the juju a little bit. Not gonna
Yep,
so do it
no
at the
Yum
Keybert
Center
Center.
there.
Yeah, do it at the Keybert Center or Rick Bozich's tweet out of all the chairs that were set up inside the KFC Yum Center. But they're going to meet at 3:00 in conference related to the leadership of the Louisville men's basketball program on Thursday, March 28th at 3:00. Take that, Diener, not 1001 Strebel and Mark Ennis are getting that. So, but yeah, so that's kind of where we are now. And look, I mean, I know people say you don't got to win the press conference and things like that. With this one and the ball of energy stuff I've seen on Twitter and some of the clips and everything, I think he will win some people over, and we're already starting to see it from basketball people saying it's a great hire. But I will caution people, this was the very thing that we heard about, Seth Greenberg, Goodman of the world saying like, Kenny Payne feels like the right fit for where Louisville is right now. And there were some people out there like, this is going to be an absolute disaster, but you kind of rely on that for some of their opinions that do that. So I warn people, for people that I trust that are basketball bennies, as I say, be cautiously optimistic with this. Just because he's not at a Power 5 and things like that. Ceiling, Dan Hurley, Nate Oates. If it doesn't work out after that, like after a few years, then, you whiffed on this and you're probably looking for a new athletic director. So, the people freaking out about this, like I see some of our friends saying, oh, I got to find a new team. I'm like, okay, like, I mean, what
Phil,
other options
I've had one friend who cannot currently drink because of some health issues that was pouring bourbon and drinking bourbon on Saturday night after the Dusty May stuff. I have another friend saying he was going to jump off the Sherman Bin Bridge. I mean, we have hit every level of craziness, I think is the right word here, throughout this coaching search. I've had friends cry on the phone with me this week. It's been
cry on the phone, man.
Yeah. I'm not joking. It's been insane. It has been an insane week here ever since Dusty May on Saturday. It's reached levels that I've never thought it was going to be. Like, guys, at some point, I get it. I grew up in Louisville. I went to all the games. And I've been around Louisville fans, Kentucky fans, Indiana fans who go to school up there. So I know crazy when I see it. This is basketball, guys.
But I go back to this. It's like you can't. This is when when.
But that's what makes the fan base in the area so great, though.
That's what's the difference between this and Pepperdine. Yes. Like this is what makes it the thing. The Bermuda Triangle, as Billy Reed, rest of the soul, used to write about it. So with Louisville, Kentucky, and Indiana, and even some of the other schools in the region. So look, I mean that's what it's gonna say. I got some other text messages, some good stories, little tidbits that I'll have to share with you, and that's for maybe we'll put this behind a paywall, and then you and I can get compensated for the stuff that we hear and all the little things that are thrown at the wall that we've heard over the years. And it's like, how about this? But boy, this week could have, you talked about this, could have a 30 for 30 for itself. And that's saying something about everything that's transpired at the University of Louisville.
I mean, at the end of this, like we keep saying, when this is all over, the 30 for 30 is going to be nuts. Like, how do you make a 30 for 30 out of the last 10, 15 years of Louisville basketball? I mean,
it's going to be like the OJ series where it's a 5-parter. I mean, it's crazy. During COVID, we've talked about this, that we reached out to some of our partners, being an ESPN affiliate, about, hey, like, what do we got to do to try and get to some ideas going? And I was like, maybe not a video thing, because that's not really our space here with the audio medium. But I was like, what about one of these 30 for 30 pods? And God made some headway on some of those things, but it's like, it feels like you got some there. I'm like, yeah, we need to revisit that again, because the moment is somebody who helped out with the Red v. Blue documentary, which was a decade plus ago. I mean, you could do four or five more documentaries just since that was when Cal and Patino were back-to-back champs in 2012 and in 2013. So much has transpired since then. It's been a zoo, but look, I mean, Pat Kelsey looks like it's trending toward he is going to be the men's basketball coach. Press conference coming up Thursday, 3 o'clock. We'll air it on ESPN Louisville. I'm sure the Floyd Street's Finest will have a full reaction to that as well.
Yeah, we'll have to do a third pod this week. Yeah, which that's the game though. That's what makes it fun. So we'll have to figure something. I'll have to figure something out on that front for sure. But you know that's the thing though. Pat Kelsey brings them back to relevancy. That's kind of to me would be a clear ending point, even if they're not in Final Four championships, but just back to like tournament team every year. Because like I sit there and wonder like, how do you do a 30 for 30 like they did the Roll Tide War Eagle one, the Alabama Auburn one, and they did that right after, Bama won the title and Auburn won the title. And they needed to wait probably about a decade for it because, you had to kick 6 and you had, hell, the game this year was insane. And at what point do you feel like, okay, we have all the information that we need to thoroughly sit through and do 8 hours of this? Because it's nuts.
It's so funny. The text messages just you and I have had over the last week, and I'm sure your phone's been blowing up. I mean, today I have 68 messages I haven't even responded to, and I'm not even like, I can only imagine like what guys like Diener and some of these other guys have been getting from their Twitter spaces and just people wanting to be on the note. But I will say 72-ish hours ago, I would have bet a lot of money that it was going to be Josh Schertz, and that's just how quickly these things move. And maybe, another interesting nugget that Diener put out this morning, that not Dusty May because he's repped by Clutch, but it was Scott Drew, Josh Schertz, and Richard Pitino. It was his understanding were all repped by the same agent, and that threw another wrinkle in there too that Diener kind of put out there, and I was like, huh. So that's how I think Richard Pitino entered the chat, because it was like he wasn't like, I think if I had to put myself in the agent's shoes, he didn't perceive this as a real opportunity at all for him to even be considered with everything that's transpired here. So that was an interesting dynamic of that. And then it's like, negotiating with somebody like Scott Drew's agent is a different caliber than a guy that's in the NIT right now. But they know how much money you are willing to spend for somebody. Again, different resume, different parts of their career. But again, knowing if that is in fact the same agent, that's an interesting dynamic. If you go back to him, it's like, oh, what about this guy? And after dealing with Clutch Sports and what happened with Dusty May, I mean, Dusty May, quite frankly, cost Josh Schertz the job, it feels like.
Yeah. Oh, it absolutely seems like it is. I wonder how that relationship is impacted by that. Because it sounds like, again, if all these rumors are true that have been swirling around, Dusty May told Josh Schertz he was taking the Louisville job. If Dusty May does not tell Josh Schertz that, he does not take the MOU at St. Louis. If Josh Schertz does not take the MOU at St. Louis, Josh Hurd can hire him without that extra $4.1 million when Dusty May spurns Louisville for Michigan. And from everything we seem to have gathered here, Josh Hurd was Josh Hurd's number one target. That after obviously like Scott Drew and Billy Donovan and those guys.
Yeah, because and a lot of our listeners have been upset. It's like, this has been a disaster. This is a coaching search. I understand it's been sloppy, but in terms of these prearranged marriages that we've talked about in the past, and make no mistake about them, that's not me defending Josh Hurd at all. But this is what comes with coaching searches from time to time. Not everything is like the Alabamas of the world with Kellen DeBoer. It happens quickly. It's been sloppy. I agree with you. Everybody that's out there with that. But this is the things that come with coaching searches, though. It can get sloppy. There are leaks. There are things that happen along the way, and that's just kind of the nature of the beast.
It's usually not this public though. Like I feel it hasn't. I can't remember a coaching search that's been this public and this sloppy, to be completely honest, since probably Tennessee and Shiano. Like
I'll grant you it's been sloppy, but when you're gauging the interest and you're swimming in the waters that Louisville is, and there's interesting dynamics of, I mean, obviously the former coach that was suing the school's son wanting to return here. That's a tentacle of it. A guy that's playing in the NIT championship still. But going back to your point, then Pat Kelsey should have been hired if that was your guy, which leads me to believe that Schertz was in fact Hurd's guy until the MOU was out there. Then he would have hired Pat Kelsey over the weekend.
Right.
Unless he didn't think he could get around the MOU.
I mean, West Virginia's been filled, Stanford's been filled, Vanderbilt's been filled, Washington's been filled, Michigan's been filled, Ohio State's been filled. You can say this is a coaching search all you want, Phil, but the point being is this is the absolute last job that of any meaningful, notice, unless, Kentucky were to double down and fire Calipari after Barnhart said they were going to bring him back a couple nights ago. So that's not happening. This is the last job that's out there. Everyone else has already gotten their guy. Yeah. Louisville still, is finally getting that. It seems like with Pat Kelsey, but it's taken them a lot longer than everyone else. It has.
And I agree with you.
And especially in this new era where the transfer portal's been open for about 10 days at this point, and that window closes on May 1st, you're losing time. You're losing precious time to get a staff together and to start contacting dudes and to get yourself ready for next season to have that product. For a pressure cooker of a job, it already is with gasoline poured on top of the flames for Pat Kelsey now with how this search has gone and how pissed off the fans are, no matter how many of them buy back in. There's a lot of pressure on him, and he's starting behind the 8 ball because this has dragged on for probably about a week longer than it should have.
And I'll grant you that. And the one last thing on the shirt stuff, and I promise I'll let it go. But the thing it's also fascinating to me with the St. Louis component, if by all accounts he really wanted to come here and St. Louis was like, no, I'm not letting you out of your MOU, how is that relationship getting started? Yeah. Off that? Because another thing is like, okay, well, maybe U of L should have just paid that, which again, we've pointed out earlier in the podcast, that wasn't going to be a fiscally responsible option. That's interesting to me too, the relationship with the administration with Josh Schertz, if the MOU was signed, which I need, like Billy Madison, need to sit in kindergarten and explain to me, is it a legal binding contract? Is it non-binding for that? But that's fascinating to me what that relationship could be like in terms of getting off to the wrong foot from the get-go. So that's another capacity. Yeah, but that's their problem down I-64 about 4.5 hours away. That's not Louisville's, because looks like Pat Kelsey is going to be the coach.
Yes, it does. And we will see what happens next for sure. Going to be a very busy and quick moving things. I think, assuming Pat Kelsey does indeed, actually attend the press conference and accept the job and all that stuff. You got to say it with, one, it being Louisville, and two, him having that history with UMass. It has to be said, but we'll see what ends up happening now moving forward.
I need an Alan Cutler situation of somebody chasing him out of the keyboard center if he decides to do that. We got Kent Taylor behind the car when he bombarded good old Josh Hurd last week. I need an Alan Cutler, Billy Gillespie thing, and then my life will be complete.
He's Phil Baker. I'm Jack Grossman. Phil, really appreciate the time. We'll have more on Pat Kelsey, I guess, being introduced tomorrow, Thursday at 3 p.m. here on Floyd Street's Finest. We'll have more reaction to that as well. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time here on Floyd Street's Finest.